New Year's resolutions, the backbone of gyms and self-help influencers alike, as the new year sparks a surge in memberships and interest in bettering ourselves. Seriously, just look at these spikes in interest at the turn of each year. New Year's resolutions make a lot of logical sense. A year is a natural benchmark for our lives. At the end of each year, we reflect on all that we accomplished and what we want to do better next year. It's a new beginning, a clean slate. Unfortunately, New Year's resolutions can actually be pretty harmful to habit change if you don't approach them correctly. I've made numerous New Year's resolutions throughout my life. Some crashed and burned within a few weeks or months, and some have stuck with me to this day. So out of all of those successes and failures, here are my 3 biggest tips for making your New Year's resolutions for 2022 stick. The first is to think small with your resolution. The first time I made a New Year's resolution was the year I started college, back in 2015. I heard about this thing called bullet journaling as a way to organize my life. I picked up a journal and set the goal of organizing my life through my bullet journal. My initial vision involved tracking several habits, making weekly and daily plans, and tracking things I did throughout the year, like the titles of books I read. I had a few great weeks where my life felt more organized than it ever had. I was tracking my habits, staying more organized than I ever had. I wasn't forgetting tasks like I was prone to do, but things quickly started to taper off. I'd miss a day of tracking habits, and then, well, the week's data would be off, so it wasn't worth tracking for the week, right? But if that week was off, then I might as well stop tracking for that month and just start up again next month, because that monthly data wouldn't be comparable. That was the last time I've ever done that level of habit tracking. In 2021, on the other hand, I knew I wanted to read more. I had read about 35 books the year prior, so I made a resolution to read a book a week on average. My goal of bullet journaling was certainly a lofty one, but that's why it failed. I was asking myself, a chronically disorganized person, to introduce several new habits into my life, not just to modify an existing one. I was asking myself to plan out the week ahead each week, to look into my bullet journal planner multiple times throughout the day to figure out what tasks I needed to do, to add tasks, to track my habits either as I did them or at the end of each night. That's a lot of new things in one day. It's like asking somebody who currently doesn't exercise at all to run a marathon. When I set a goal of reading a book a week, though, it just built on an existing habit I had. I had already read 35 books, so the jump to 52 wasn't that large, but it was a difference that I wanted to make in my life to establish the daily habit of reading. And because it was a modification to something I was already doing and a realistic goal, I was able to achieve it. So when you're thinking about creating a New Year's resolution, pick something that you already do and build on it, or start really small with a new habit you want to build. My general rule of thumb is that for your New Year's resolutions, it should be something you can do in 15 minutes every day. The second piece of advice I remind myself of each year is to be specific with your goals. One of the biggest reasons New Year's resolutions or goal setting in general fails is that there's a disconnect between the goal itself and the day-to-day actions it would take to get there. For example, if your resolution would be to start exercising more or to be self-employed by the end of the year, those are things that are great goals, but they don't dictate your daily actions. You can start later on those goals. If you want to start a business, you can do that later, a few months down the line. If you want to start exercising more, well, you've got the whole year to do that. You can apply a similar process to whatever your goal for the new year is. For example, if your first instinct is that you want to get in better shape, figure out what the specific steps needed to get there, something that's actionable for you. Maybe it's to exercise 30 minutes a day, 3 days a week. If you want to be self-employed, maybe you spend 15 minutes a day working on your business, or maybe even 10 hours a week with a little more time on the weekends. Whatever it is, set an actionable goal towards your overall goal. My final piece of advice to make your New Year's resolution stick is to create an attainable plan before the new year hits. I've fallen into the motivation trap a number of times throughout my self-improvement journey. You know the one. You start off a new habit full of motivation, excited for the change you're going to make in your life. And that motivation carries you through a few weeks of building the habit as you start to feel better about yourself. But inevitably you slow down in your progress, or you stagnate for a few days, the motivation falters, and you give up on the habit completely. That's how it was for me with bullet journaling. I started with a lot of motivation to organize my life, but very little actual planning. I would just plan for the week ahead over the weekend whenever inspiration struck, or I would take out my bullet journal and look at it whenever I remembered to. When I was tracking habits, it was sometimes at the end of the night, sometimes as I finished the habits, whenever I felt like doing it. On the other hand, with my goal of reading 1 book a week this year, I started out with a specific plan. I considered the average number of pages in the books I read, usually somewhere between 300 and 400. Some were shorter and some were longer, but I figured that if I averaged about 350 pages a week, that would come out to about 1 book a week. That means I had to read 50 pages per day. But my planning didn't stop there. My schedule is pretty set in stone, so I generally tend to know when I have break times, and I could figure out when I had about 30 minutes to sit down and read, and that's how long it would take me to read 50 pages. And it works. I read at just about the same time every day because of this habit I built up. So when you're creating a plan for the new year, make sure it's both specific and attainable. Try to modify an existing habit routine if you can. If your goal is to read more, maybe replace a little bit of Netflix time with reading time, time that you're already relaxing. Just change the activity you're doing. Or if your goal is to go to the gym, don't try to create an entirely new habit routine of coming home from work, getting changed, going back out to the gym, coming home, showering, eating dinner, completely interrupting your normal schedule. Instead, bring your gym clothes with you to work. Change at the gym. That way you only have to modify one habit, which is your drive home from work. It's a much more attainable schedule. Ultimately, the new year really is a fantastic time for establishing new habits. We can't ignore the psychological boost of the fresh start that a new year provides. If you follow these 3 steps, you'll create an effective New Year's resolution that will help you make a real difference in your life by the end of 2022.